an AK74u loadout and an AK loadout that was meant to mimic a 74u, since that's kind of the whole point of a 74u versus a regular AK. And a lot of that just went hand in hand somehow. I was planning to do that, and had a 74u loadout set up. My intention was to see how much they had nerfed it, because originally it might as well have been broken. And on the broken, I mean OP. When the game first launched, the 74U's velocity was somehow magically, versus any other rifle, any other submachine gun, on par with the assault rifles. And when you actually took it into one of the large modes, like Fireteam, without personally calculating it on like a high-speed camera kind of level of the range and the velocity, it was crazy. It like you could literally sit there and just beam people across the map with the 74U the same way you could a high-powered assault rifle. And none of the other SMGs would do that. So eventually, over months, whatever they do, there's been this whole plague of hidden nerfs and stuff on the guns. And I don't mean to sound negative, but it's true. It matters if you actually pay money for the game and buy these packs and do this stuff and like want to get good at the game. I don't know what they've done. I would have to go back over the course of now over 7 months more since the beta to see what they've done to the guns. But I do know that the 74U is no longer as good as it was before. And primarily to me, it seems that it is more wobbly, bouncy, and it's just not as accurate, and it doesn't have as much punch as it used to. More wobbly, less punch, so it seems. And so I wanted to check and see what was happening with this. And what happened was I found out the Mac 10, which I think has been buffed, is just incredible. Like, at least in Cold War. And the only shortcoming of the Mac 10 is that the velocity is half of a low-end assault rifle. So as long as you do something that's 100% velocity boost, I mean, it doesn't have to be 100, but that would be ideal. As long as you do a velocity boost to get it up to double it to the level of the assault rifle, you are set. That thing is freaking phenomenal. I mean, there may be some issues here and there. Now, keeping in mind, I'm playing this on Outbreak right now. I played Fireteam Dirty Bomb until my eyes bled. I was really fucking good at it. I mean, I had so many wins. I had such great freaking KD. I posted videos on YouTube. And then the Hard Point and this dumb freaking like thing that's out now have come out, and they just took everything that was bad about Fireteam. I mean, there's a reason no pros are playing Fireteam. It's because it's garbage. And, whatever. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. But, my point being that I'm playing with these now. I've gone in on League Play and run 40-2 level matches. Like 20 KD matches, and still lost. That's how awful the League Play matching system is. And I'm not the only person to experience this. It's crazy, because like there are some small streamers who go in and play League Play and are being given the maximum ranks, and some of them are incredibly good. I have watched some of these people, and they're really good. But their teams, the matchmaking, everything, the network connections are working. And when I say good, I mean that given all of those facts, the teams, the pings, the connections, the whatever, everything is snap point. And I'm going in and I'm having two people drop a match. I'm having the shittiest connections you can possibly imagine. It's just shit. And so, as much as I want to play League Play, I'm solo. Now, one thing I've noticed is that a lot of those people who are doing well are in parties. And I don't know what they're doing as far as all that concerns. That's not my job. But I do know that people who are incredibly good at this game have gone into league play and just basically gotten shit on by the matchmaking stat system to a point that makes no sense. And that includes the biggest YouTuber tester person in the world, Exclusive Ace, who has literally been invited out to their tournaments, has won consistently, gets all the pros and the devs at their studio tournaments. And he went into this stupid league play system, and it just completely shit on him. It gave him garbage teammates. It gave them no status ranking, no matter what he did, no matter how much they won. It did not do what it's doing with these other people, and that's just crazy. So I eventually stopped on league play because it didn't have any personal worth. I was like consistently superior to the other people. No offense, I was doing infinitely better, and it was like there was no point to it. We still lost. The stats did not reflect anything. And now, as of Season 3, I've effectively stopped multiplayer because something happened. In my opinion, they've changed what people don't realize. And I hope somebody watches this video at this point, because I really don't feel like blowing hot air here. There is no online multiplayer match in any Call of Duty game, in any first-person shooter game, that is not to some degree artificial. And it is artificial because there is never going to be a time that there is not a delay based on connectivity and server performance. And that is not a trivial issue. It is it is the predominant deciding factor in easily over half of every gunfight you will ever experience in an online multiplayer shooting game. And that is not something that you can easily see on your screen, because it's like Einstein's general and special theories of relativity. No joke. What you are seeing on your screen is not what the server is seeing, and it's not what the other player is seeing, because there is an intrinsic delay over the internet. The only way that anybody is ever going to know what is actually happening and their skill level, there are some things you can tell. For example, you can tell by positioning, loadout choice, movement strategies, team behavior, call-outs, things, if somebody has a common sense basis or is skilled at team play in a game. But if you are literally playing there the way the majority of the FPS community does, in a comless type environment, no clue what's going on, half the people have no idea what the stats even are, it's just complete junk. I mean, it's pretty much arbitrary, because what you're seeing on your screen of the enemy's positions, their firing, everything, are not real. That is not what is happening in real time. I cannot stress enough, it's not real. Now, there are times, and I've said this like to people 100 times, I have watched Iron play, and apparently, I think he's in the Great Lakes area if I remember correctly. Their internet, or at least what he's experiencing with his routing service and setup, it is incredibly on point. I have gone in and watched days of Iron playing this stuff. I'm not trying to aggrandize the guy. Anybody with a decent team could theoretically do what any of them are doing. It's actually more. Now, his sniping skills are excellent. I mean, he's just immediately on point, and that's phenomenal. He's like 10 times the sniper that I am. But you know, their connectivity is very close to somehow being pinpoint accurate in Warzone. I don't know if they're prioritized. I don't know if it's special gaming routers and lobbies that he's ending up with. But I have sat there and watched gunfights that are personally what I think the Blizzard networking guys who were working with Overwatch somehow got involved and corrected Warzone to have a superior 20 to 1 netcode of any Call of Duty that has ever happened, despite the fact that the servers are kind of crappy. So, whatever, it's still, for me, it is a miserable experience. I can play Plunder for some reason and get decently normal performance, and I will go into Warzone, and it is like it is literally on a PS4 Pro dropping to what seems to be 10 frames per second. It hitches. It has a slowdown where when the gunfight happens, you're literally unable to respond while it is computing what's happening, and then you're dead. It has a blatant shooter's advantage. It has a positional shooter's advantage on my system that it does not have apparently on Irons. I don't know what they're doing. He plays on PC. So, whatever. I can't get into, like, whatever. I just don't even play it. I played Plunder a bunch because there was better performance in it. But, I think the bottom line is that if anybody will get into actually looking at testing that happens on these games, I don't need to sit here and conjure something to explain losing a gunfight. It is a known fact that these shooter games, as the predominant rule, follow shooter's advantage. If you don't know what that means, you need to look it up. And, it's it basically, like, it muddies all of these statistics and everything. So all that in mind, the thing is that I was getting I basically wanted to test the guns, and my point is that I am playing with these in Outbreak right now. And the reason I'm playing Outbreak is because I can't take what's happened on Season 3. They seem to have changed the netcode. And the whole point of that whole tangent there was that they have, as far as I can tell, 6 months into the game, they have changed a netcode bias between the lag compensation. And what this turned into was that I went to a whole project of finding out what are they really doing with lag comp. And apparently, according directly to the Treyarch Development Studio people, they are penalizing low ping connections in online battles on a player-to-player basis with a system of artificial delay. Meaning that if you were on a 10 millisecond ping and someone else is on an 80, there is a generic model where they split the difference of 70 ping and add a 35 millisecond delay to the person on 10 ping. If you don't think that that could be important, it appears that what happens when you go to do that is that it makes your controls feel floaty. When you go to move, it feels like there's a delay. When you go to aim, everything, it feels swishy. It literally feels like you're mildly intoxicated while attempting to aim because they put you on an artificial delay. So, after years of playing the games, and it coming out that apparently they've been doing these artificial delay systems to different degrees secretly behind the scenes since Black Ops 2, at least. If you go into a match and it feels floaty and drifty while you're trying to aim, it's more than likely because you're on an artificial delay, which is going to basically penalize you the entire match because nobody is clear on what's happening on the player-to-player versus the squad versus squad, the 1v2, 1v3, 1v4 type environments. I do not think personally that they have any amount of computational server power to constantly evaluate the proximities. This is something that happened in Battlefield 4. They created what was called a high frequency update bubble, which following their own rules, and this was not in place before. They started Battlefield 4 on the shittiest of frickin' platforms. And there was a reason they started on shitty platforms. When you look into it, they were given guidelines by Microsoft and Sony that they had to pander to the lowest common denominator of performance in building the games. And when that happened, they released those games at a 10 hertz server performance with seemingly no player-to-player specificity, where it was just shit. Literally, you were dealing with 100 to 150 milliseconds of delay on either end of a gunfight, regardless of if you had nearly instantaneous connection to the servers, because of the low hertz rates. And what they did was they've gradually bumped it up. Battlefield 1, to my knowledge, reached the pinnacle of the series. They actually had test modes that were running at 120 hertz. If you're at 120 hertz, you're gold. And they have servers as of Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, and even for other games like I play Plants vs. Zombies, that you can, on the East Coast, get a 5 millisecond ping. If you are on 120 hertz with a 5 millisecond ping, you are gold. And that is not Call of Duty. Call of Duty is putting people on 85 millisecond pings on 20 hertz servers. When Battlefield 4 launched, it was 10 hertz regardless of ping, typically about 45, I guess, and it was awful. What that presented was, because virtually all of these games were following a shooter's advantage model. Anytime you were on the receiving end of gunfire, you were getting an abbreviated death, because the person, it's not rocket science. If there's a delay over the internet, and that amounts to 100 milliseconds of delay, and the time to kill on a gun is 200 milliseconds, the person moves in and the average human reaction time is maybe 100 milliseconds, and that's already the delay before you can ever even see them, even if ideal, and they're already shooting. That is literally, by definition, going to cut the time to kill on the gun to half. That's not rocket science. You're going to get, and the question is, what are you going to see when that happens? And we have definitive proof. It's been tested over and over that what you see is a flash of damage that kills you in half the time that it should. This is that is the, and nobody wants to talk about it because they're making money on these games. That is the rule. It's the rule. The rule isn't the fair gunfight. The rule is the flash of damage on TTK lag comp. So all the people who are in there thinking about this and skill-based matchmaking and we're getting robbed and people are getting boosts and whatever, they probably are. I mean, I have seen people get hits that people want to blame on a desynced hitbox that I don't think is a desynced hitbox. From my experience, I played Cold War close to 25 days this year already. I played Modern Warfare for close to 1,000 hours last year. I have played these games incessantly across series, Battlefield, Halo, everything, for like 7 years now. And I have seen every indication that there are artificially augmented hits. But, whatever. It doesn't really matter, because none of those would fall outside of the values of all of this intrinsic delay of the internet. So my point is, and this gets into, they've had people on LANs and split screens that have had a heavy amount of delay. Up to 100 milliseconds delay, even on split screen or LAN, depending on the games. And the game that tested repeatedly to have the lowest intrinsic delay on a pure fiber optic LAN or split screen was Halo. Where's Halo? I don't know. I guess they're in recuperation mode after that Greg incident. But, whatever. So you do the best you can. And I am testing this stuff on Outbreak because I don't feel like playing any of that at this point. It's just going to total shit. Fireteam's god-awful. I hate Warzone. The frickin' multiplayer in Cold War, my KD is falling on a daily basis because they have done something. Either there's one, either one, there are more players now that are bogging the servers down. Two, they've changed the net code, or something's going on because it's just total shit. I literally go in. I didn't even finish the Adler event or this Action Heroes event in Cold War because literally every single match I go into is a spastic bunch of baloney. Like, I go to shoot at people and nothing is hitting, and people are just popping out of nowhere, and I'm getting killed in what seems to be half any normal amount of time. So I just stopped. I refused. I'm not going to have any part in it. But I went ahead and I was playing on Outbreak with the loadouts. And I'm going to see. If everything settles down, I intend to play again. But what it boiled down to... Hold on just a sec. What it boiled down to was I was going to test out the 74u loadout and the standard AK loadout, and somehow in the process of doing the 74u, I picked up an AK and it was phenomenal. It was so much better than the 74u, and I said, well, what is going on? And so I went and I tested because I want some range out of the guns. Like, I don't want to be a lot of people want to run the SMGs in here because they want to get the sights out of the way and stuff. But when you're trying to do something and you see an enemy at range, I want to be able to take out that enemy. And if I can't scope them with something, so, it's like a balance between you can see people, you're trying to control stuff, you want to watch out for teammates, you're trying to post up at least intermittently. The SMG can't do it. And, like, what kind of range can you get on stuff? And the AK was just whipping it. And so basically what that came down to was, okay, so how did this AK loadout work? And I basically went in and I basically tried to mimic the AK because I wasn't sure what was on it. And it worked. And it's great. And after playing around and getting a chance to test these things out at different ranges here in Outbreak, some very interesting stuff happened. Which was that, one, on the assault rifles, the QBZ and the Groza ended up doing exactly what I wanted them to do. One, they were incredibly mobile, just like the description said. And two, they had incredibly accurate hip fire, which was what I was wanting. I wanted to be able to go around and not be reliant on that, still be able to add some degree of scope, still have some range, still have some power. And boy, the QBZ and the Groza just ended up whipping it. And so that basically turned into looking at some of the stats. And so I'm going to pull up the... I went to this thing... there's an issue of TTK versus damage per second, and also there's the issue of headshot multipliers or whatever. And so for the time being, I'm just going to say all of that is fringe because the TTK matters in the 6v6, 5v5 kind of 3v3 stuff, not in the larger modes and this Outbreak or Fireteam kind of thing. And so basically... Just for a second, I'm going to review this. I'm going into the damage per second, point blank, to the chest, on all the guns. And then I'm going to look at the... in the top 10, excluding shotguns and sniper rifles. MAC-10, absolute best. Stoner, next to the MAC-10. MP5... I probably ought to leave the marksman rifles out. The Type 63 is right up there, but they're like borderline sniper rifles, so I'm going to exclude those two. I'm just going to go with submachine guns, assault rifles, and LMGs. So your MAC-10 is the best on the damage point blank, the Stoner, the MP5, the RPD, the AK74u, the KSP, and then you get into some of the mid-tier stuff. The mid-tier stuff is not that far off. Your M60, PPSH, Groza, Bullfrog, and basically my point here is in playing with all of these guns, I found out that the Groza and the QBZ were doing so well. So if you look at the Groza, it has a damage per second up close of 442 compared to a submachine gun at 513, or really, if these stats are correct, the Groza up close has the highest standard assault rifle damage. It's above the AK. It's above the FFAR. It's above the FARA. So when it's mobile and you're able to get that hip fire out of it, up close at least, you're able to get that damage. And what I was advising people before was to take the maximum scoped visibility based range of your guns to kind of size them up, because some of these guns have 20x scopes, and some of the ones like the FARA that are listed as having range really don't go that far. The FARA only has a 4x scope, so it just kind of ruins the FARA, if you ask me. But basically what I'm trying to find is the QBZ. The QBZ is definitely on the lower end. And realistically speaking, between the Groza and the QBZ, with them having some similar mobility stats and stuff, if you went in, the QBZ at 384 damage versus the Groza at 442, that's a good 60 points per second. If you're in the 6v6, 5v5, 3v3 type modes, it's going to matter. You're probably going to get blown out of the water unless you're being sneaky and ninja-like with the QBZ. The Groza, not at all, because the Groza is highest of the assault rifles, and they're very similar. The QBZ is more mobile, though. And so for me, in playing any of these Fireteam Battle Royale type zombies modes, the QBZ was incredible. It was like having a submachine gun with the range and firepower of an assault rifle. But, like I said, there's a big difference between playing in a larger map and playing constantly close quarter stuff in one of these multiplayer games. Combined arms, maybe the QBZ, as long as you kept a little bit of like tactical bases around you, would be okay. But the point being that those were the mobile ones. And so at the same time, if you look at those, you have your MAC-10 with all of this damage. And as it turns out, the MAC-10 was basically like, once you put some basic recoil controls on it, it's incredible. The thing's just a death machine. The only issue is the velocity on it and maybe some of the damage fall-off range, but it was doing even great as far as the damage fall-off range goes. And basically that all came down to mobility. So it's kind of hard to not be all over the place and looking at this stuff, but the AK74u used to be so much better on accuracy, and where it has a value now that's in the top 10 of the damage per second, it does not effectively turn into that anymore because it is so wobbly and bouncy all over the place, and it takes attachments to get it to be where you want it to be. It still has good velocity. But actually, I'm going to take a break for just a second. I have to go do something. Right back. Okay, so the recapitulating here. AK74u versus AK, where's the performance difference coming from? Your SMGs should normally be mobile, but with less range. Up close, they're typically given more firepower. It's kind of like unrealistic, but whatever the case, in real life, the point of your SMGs is to be, there are actually quite a few points. The point of your SMGs is to, one, be lightweight and mobile, and two, also not to have a lot of extraneous damage all over the place because of civilian usage and police and stuff, where you just want controlled, limited, and focused on one target. And also there are costs involved, but whatever. So the thing that I discovered in playing with all this that was actually a big deal was that there were two guns, normally speaking, in the assault rifle category that did match their stats, or at least their listing, not specific stats, the general category type of gun, which was that the Groza and the QBZ are in fact incredibly mobile to the level of an SMG were working. And my point here with this is that the QBZ damage is low. If you're going into a multiplayer, a standard typical small scale basis multiplayer, that is going to be a terribly big deal, and the QBZ is probably just going to get blown out of the water unless you're playing some kind of support role, which who wants to do that? Whereas the Groza, you can kit it, get it down, get it quick, get it accurate, get the hip fire up, and it's one of the top damage per second assault rifles, if not the number one. And I can just hear gasps of what. So what were the stats on it? So as long as this is currently correct, the Groza is at 442 DPS at 0 meters. The next closest assault rifle is the FARA, or the FFAR, at 434 and 432. So it's beating the FARA and the FFAR, and the FARA is not a CQC gun. The FARA is slow, heavy recoil, hard to rotate and move. This has come up sometime. To my knowledge, no one has measured the pivot speed of the various guns in a class. By pivot speed, that means that when you go to look on the aim sensitivity and the multipliers for scopes, that is not telling you the stats per gun on the axis pivot speed. So I don't know if they have where that's coming from. I don't know where the pivot speed is actually happening, but the actual pivot speed is a big deal. And so again, you know, all of these things have caveats of, just because it has a high DPS, that doesn't mean that it's accurate. That doesn't mean the recoil is not all over the place. It doesn't mean that it doesn't fall off. It doesn't mean that it's hard on that pivot and centering and rotation and stuff, or the aim down sight time. All of those things are going to come into play. But keeping in mind that there were two guns in the assault rifle category that could keep up with SMGs, I was going to kit the AK. And kitting the AK basically came down to it's slower. Some factors, whatever factors are involved in this, are slower. So here is really my point. This is the point of this this video here. Is that fortunately enough, in Cold War at least, everything has been put into per class blanket stats. And that makes it incredibly easy. First off, the sights do not affect the ADS time, or at least they aren't supposed to. If they do, they've hidden stuff. By the general lease information and the stats, the sights are not affecting ADS time. And that is incredibly powerful. It means the game is action. It means you don't have to worry. If you want to go long range, short range, whatever, you aren't like in Modern Warfare Warzone where it's taken 20 times as long to pull up a long range sight. It just works. You take the same gun and just kit it and pull the sight up. Realistically speaking, sights don't weigh that much. So there's really nothing wrong with that. Second is that as soon as you go into any of your movement speed stats, here we go. Base movement speed. They're all in fundamental categories. And so every SMG, again, at least as far as I know, every SMG is in a right at 290 meters per minute. So that means that when you go to pick when you're talking about your actual movement, just not sprinting, walking at maximum speed, they're all the same. When you go into the assault rifles, they are all also exactly the same. And even the LMGs are the same as the assault rifles. So I'm going to not involve DMRs or sniping rifles or shotguns or anything else. I'm just going to look at SMGs, assault rifles, and LMGs. And that basically means there are only two values, two standard values for those. There's an assault rifle LMG movement value, and there's an SMG movement value. And let's see, where are the SMGs? Okay, every SMG is at 289.68. All of the assault rifles and LMGs are at 275.20. There is one exception, which is the QBZ. The QBZ is pretty much split between the assault rifles and the SMGs, and that's the mobility on it. So, that's the fundamental movement speed. Check out the sprint speed. Sprint speed on the SMGs, 396.97. On the assault rifles, 388.66. There's a third category in these on the sprint speed where the LMGs fall off significantly. The sprint speed on the LMGs is much lower, and they aren't all the same. The QBZ doesn't have any advantage on the sprint speed in these. Shooting movement speed. This is if you are not aimed down sight at all, you're running, and you're shooting. And apparently the listings on this stat in the game are really not correct. They have a meter-based listing when in fact it's actually a percentage of detriment over your standard walking, sprinting, or ADS. They're all different, apparently. Any of your regular values get reduced by a percentage, which is what this should have been listed as when you begin shooting, and they're all different. But keeping that in mind, whatever the case, going into the shooting move speed. All of the SMGs the same. all of the majority of the assault rifles are the same. They are a decent amount lower. The AK has an extra penalty that slows it down while moving and shooting that the others don't. The QBZ has a significant boost, which puts it again halfway between the assault rifles and the SMGs. So consistently, the pattern that you see here, there's a decent difference between the categories. Within the categories, they're essentially all the same. The only oddballs are the LMGs are much slower on the sprinting stuff, and the QBZ on the fundamental stats is split, unlike any of the other guns, right between. And on the shooting movement speed, the AK is the slowest of them. Sprint to fire. Now, again, sprint to fire, I did a video on this last year in Modern Warfare, because as it turned out, in any actual real gameplay, in any of the competitive level matches, your sprint to fire was possibly the single most important stat, and people didn't even realize it. When you looked at how long it took you to get the gun up in conjunction with ADS time, it's hard to say which one was worse. They both are equivalently important, and I'm not clear on how they were stacking the two of them. But your sprint to fire time was in many cases multiple times enough to kill someone. If you didn't reduce your sprint to fire with the way you were running around the map, you were just as bad as if you had a 500 millisecond ADS rifle. If you had a 500 ADS gun, there are guns in that game that were killing at 100 to 150 milliseconds. That literally meant that by the time you could get a gun up on ADS, you were killed 2 to 3 times over. And the same thing was happening with sprint to fire, and whatever stacking was happening between the two values. If you put your sprint to fire low on Modern Warfare 2019, it was one of the single most important things you could do. In these larger modes, where like I'm playing on Outbreak, that's not nearly so much of a big deal. You have these vast open spaces, same thing Fireteam, same thing in non-CQC Warzone or something, but Warzone is so congested that the sprint to fire is going to come up, aside from the fact that the people aren't running around so much as they do in TDM. Basically, the sprint to fire is coming from your movement and your sprinting speed and coming out of it. And again, I'm not sure, without actually going in and testing stuff, I don't know at what point there's a gradient between like regular walking, degrees of sprinting, the fall off. Their list of times this year didn't seem to make any sense. Typically speaking, you can sprint about in each of the last few games, you can sprint roughly 7 to 8 meters per second. And that was not what they were listing. And when you're talking about the fall off and the entry and everything else, whatever, there's some general things. But I'll go into sprint to fire, and again, it's all very simple this year. Every SMG has the same sprint to fire. Every assault rifle has the same sprint to fire. In fact, the difference between the assault rifles and the SMGs is negligible at best. Your LMGs have a little bit more of a discrepancy. That if you're looking at the LMGs versus the SMGs, yeah, that's going to matter. Comparing them straight one-to-one, like between the two tiers of categories, like SMG to AK and AR-AK to LMG, between those two ends of it, there's really not that much of a difference. Only when you cross from the quick one to the high one is there any substantial difference, which is about 100 milliseconds on the sprint to fire. But other than that, they are not that different. So it's not even as much of a factor this year. Aiming movement speed. This is the one. So at this point, looking at movement speed, sprint speed, shooting movement speed is going to be the least impactful. Once you actually find your target and are shooting, you can pull off and reacquire your targets. And during that time, you're going to have transitions and stuff. Very few people spend their time running around in a constant shooting motion. So shooting movement speed is not really that big of a deal. So far, between movement speed, sprint to fire, this one right here, the aiming movement speed, is going to be the most impactful on gameplay. This is when you're actually ADS with your gun attempting to move. So what's the aiming movement speed? Again, every SMG is exactly the same. All of the assault rifles, except for the QBZ, are exactly the same. And where is it? The LMGs are, there are only 3 of them. They've really fallen through on the LMGs this year. The LMGs are in their own category. One of them's different. And so what's the difference? So if you're looking at your actual aiming movement speed, where this is going to probably be your most impactful stat as far as the mobility on these guns. Your aiming movement speed is at 229 meters per minute on the SMGs and falls down to 108, right at 109 on your assault rifles. The one assault rifle that has a difference is the QBZ again, which is the mobile one. And this is all why, personally, I would say the QBZ needs a damage buff. The mobility's nice, but I don't think it really adjusts for the mobility. I don't think the damage and mobility are a fair trade-off because it's that low on damage. But whatever the case, their fall-off ranges and other stuff, whatever. The QBZ is a little bit faster, but nothing to really amount to much. Like, if you were to actually look at these stats and say, oh, do I need to do something on my QBZ to make it faster than the standard assault rifle? No, it's trivial. It's like it's just put there to matter. However, the difference between the assault rifles and the SMGs, the assault rifles are twice as slow as the SMGs. They're half the speed while you're moving around attempting to aim. And your LMGs are roughly about 75 meters per minute, which is a third. Less than a third of the speed of the submachine guns. And right at just, it's about like 60% of an assault rifle. The RPD is actually a little bit faster, but again, compared to the other ones, it's kind of trivial. It really doesn't matter. So if you're going into, this is the point, the sprint to fires, if you're in a 5v5, 6v6, 3v3 mode, the getting your attachments and your sprint to fire stuff are going to matter. There's about a 100 millisecond window between the SMGs and the LMGs. It can make a difference if you're having to pull out a sprint a lot. But other than that, they're all in the same general categories. Your movement speed and your sprinting speed are all in the same categories. And the one that's going to matter the most is its aiming movement speed. So if you want to kit an assault rifle to be on par with an SMG, you have to deal with the fact, not with sprint out time, which is 50 milliseconds difference. It's not even going to matter. but with the aiming movement speed, which is less than half of the SMG movement speed. Pulling these things up again. So sprint fire, not going to worry about. Aiming movement speed, incredibly important. Shooting movement speed, not that big of a deal, and there aren't that many differences. Movement speed and sprinting speed, going back to address. The movement speed on the SMGs is all at around 289, whereas the assault rifles are all around 275. That does not affect at all the ADS time. So realistically speaking, on your movement speed, you're talking about between 275 and 289. I'm just going to round it off and say that's 15 meters per minute. That is 1.5 meters per 6 seconds. That's like 0.25 meters per second. 0.25 meters per second would be 2.5 per 10 seconds would be about 15 per minute. So these, it could potentially come up, but even that, as far as the movement, there's not a substantial difference there. 275 meters per minute. Pull up the calculator here. .275 meters per minute. Divide that by 60 to get to the seconds. Is oh, hold up, before I do that, I need to look at the difference between the two rather than the actual value, so I'll just get it right to the point. Okay, 275 on an assault rifle versus 290 on an SMG is about 15 meters per minute difference. So you divide that into seconds, that is a quarter of a meter per second. Divide that into 250 milliseconds. It's barely even there. Like, there's essentially like nothing there. So that's all fine if somebody wants to boost their movement speed, but if you're talking realistically speaking what's actually mattering, that should be the last of your concerns. Your concerns on your gun should be your recoil. The sprint to fire is virtually non-existent. The aim walking movement speed is just absolutely critical. Again, going back to check the sprint speed. Sprint speed, SMGs 396, AKs 388. So you're talking about an 8 meter per minute difference. That's even less. It's just so fractional, it doesn't even matter. Like, where they came up with this, I have no idea. When you get to the LMGs, it's a little bit different, but your sprinting speed and your movement speed between the two classes of guns are basically non-existent. The thing that matters is the aiming movement speed. Okay, so you go to ADS time. This is the other thing that's going to matter, because you have two values here that actually just a second. You have two values on your ADS time that are going to matter. One is what the ADS time is, and two is what is your hip fire. Because if you aren't ADSing, you're hip firing. So if you have a gun that can do accurate hip fire, you don't have to count on ADS much. If you do not have a gun that can do accurate hip fire, you're going to have to ADS. And whatever the case, they knew this when they did the stats on it. I have to wait on the ad to roll here. Okay, ADS time. So my point being that when you look at the ADS times, if your gun can have accurate hip fire where you don't have to ADS, it nullifies the importance of this, or mitigates the importance of this value. Okay, ADS time. Again, it's so easy this year. I really need to double check this because there's an outlier here. There's an oddball. I'll pull it up here on the stats in a minute. All of the SMGs have the same ADS time. 275 milliseconds. The majority of the assault rifles all have the same ADS time. 300 milliseconds. The FARA is 325, which means it's like going from an SMG to an AR, but a notch above. The AK74u has a 300 on par with the standard assault rifles, which is the same. So in other words, on your ADS time, your AK74u is the only SMG that notches up because it performs more like an assault rifle. And on your assault rifles, the only one that notches up is the FARA. It's longer range and higher powered. And it's just completely shitty as hell. The only weird one here is the Groza, which by the stat listings that I have, and this gets back to apparently the Groza being so great on a mobile level. Because the damage difference between the Groza and the QBZ is immense in reality. The mobility is so similar that if you can get stats on the Groza that balance out the slight mobility perks on the QBZ, you would definitely want to go with Groza. And by the listings here, if this is correct, the Groza has a ADS time that is lower than any of the SMGs. So I'm going to pull up the stats here and double check this. I mean, of course, if they're correct. Okay, submachine guns, MP5. ADS time, 275. That matches the stats I have. Go with the lightweight one, the Mac 10. ADS time, 275. Get over to the AK74u, which is supposed to be closer to the assault rifles at 300. ADS time 300. And go back to the Groza. ADS time 266. That's all direct match. Okay, and if that's 266, what was the QBZ? $283. All exact match. So the I don't think I said this a second ago. The QBZ is again split between the assault rifles and the SMGs, but they have somehow decided to give the Groza a better ADS time than any of them. So, again, from everything that I have seen corroborated by stats, from everything in playing with it, the fundamental QBZ is phenomenal mobility-wise. They boosted it on everything. The only thing that it doesn't have a boost on is this ADS time with the Groza. But the Groza is so much more powerful that between the two, if you're going to play a standard competitive 6v6, 5v5, 3v3 type mode, or even the combined arms kind of stuff, anything that's not the bigger maps, or Warzone possibly, your Groza is going to trounce all of it because it is just that damaging. It's one of the top damaging rifles in the game, and you can run it like an SMG with all these mobility things. So, what else was left on this? That's pretty much it. The other thing that came up is the vertical and horizontal recoil control. And so the really interesting thing with this was that when I went in on the try to get something here that doesn't have any recoil stats. Okay, if the baseline AK, the AK is pretty bouncy, and even with some of the maximum, nearly the maximum recoil controls on it, it's still bouncy. But if you are at a this was basically the point. If you keep all of those stats in mind, there is no significant difference in movement speed, sprinting speed, effective reality of shooting movement speed, sprint to fire, on anything between these SMGs and assault rifles. The one that's actually going to matter is the ADS movement speed, which is literally less than half on the assault rifles. Or the ADS time, and then everything else you just stack onto that. And so I was basically kitting the AK. I put everything on the AK to keep the aim walking movement speed up and to mitigate the recoil because it was so bouncy. I really, like, to be on top of this, I should go into the 74u's recoil stats and compare them direct one-to-one. I think I'll do that later because I'm already getting kind of, like, this is just getting to a point of, like, this is enough. It's like saturation level. But, basically what happened was I went in on here, and at these values, these should be read as absolute values, 405 and 84, not positive or negative, because those are directionally based. But the 406 and the 84, I was worried about the 84, and as it turned out, I was trying to use this one that had the 7%, which took it down to the vertical was at 405, and this one took it down to 376, which I thought would be okay. It was not. When I attempted to go in and just aim and get headshots, basically I was going for all headshots. And this was not cutting it. I didn't want to mess up the horizontal because the general rule has always been the horizontal is harder to control. So I had to bump it up, and the highest available one, there were two that were available that were high. In the regular game, the difference between these two is going to matter because this one has a degree of suppression that hides your dot on the map. The vertical recoil on it should be, if this is accurate, worthless. This 1%, that should not amount to anything. The thing that actually matters is the suppression, which is an 85% that's not listed here. And it was losing horizontal recoil by 12, so I didn't want to do that. And even now, even though I've used this thing before, I'm not really sure how much of a difference this makes. So what I do know is that on the 8% horizontal recoil loss, you can definitely tell that it's bouncing, it's going up and to the left. But it was still totally manageable. And what was surprising was that the 12% versus the 7 was night and day. I was able to go from like completely missing shots that I thought I was going to get on the vertical bounce at any decent 4x kind of level range to hitting everything by that 7 versus 12. And the horizontal made next to no difference. So my point being that what that showed was that this 84, if you see any gun, now what's going to happen is that centering speed is going to matter on some of them. I'm not sure how much it matters, but roughly speaking, this 84 absolute value was not a big deal. And even going up to 90 here was not terribly a big deal. It'd have been nice if it wasn't there, but I had no problem hitting shots with it. Whereas the 376 versus the 356 was a big deal. And I think that those are decent guideline values to go by. This is a decently high recoil rifle, decently powerful. You want to be able to hit your shots. You want to be able to hold some range. And again, the reason these two would matter would be because of the suppression. The horizontal was getting pretty bad with this one. I don't know that it's really manageable here. I would have to test it out again. But as far as vertical goes, it was night and day, going from 7 to 12 on this. So as far as values go, if you could get, I would suggest here that on any gun in the game, again, this is going to be slightly modified by the centering speed, but on any gun at the game, if you can get your horizontal below 90 and your vertical below 360, they're bearable. And lower the better. Okay, I'm going to go play some. So here, case in point. Good. I haven't actually looked at these. Okay, I'm going to take a baseline AK. Here will be this will be like putting this in motion here. AK, no attachments. Keeping that, where was that? Keeping that rough like 350. What did I do with this one? Okay, got it at 75 and 350, which was decently good. $75 and $350. Baseline AK, 84, 388. 84 and, oh wait, 84 and 405, excuse me. 84 and 405. 84 and 405 versus somehow the 74U has a massive amount of horizontal recoil. And this does seem to be correct. When I went to use it, again, this all goes back to how the other day I was testing these two, and I ended up picking up the AK, and it was so much better. And this is exactly what it was really doing. It was the 74U was bouncing all over the place like a pinata. So a baseline 74U has 210 horizontal, whereas the I'm not going to go through pulling all those off. Night and day. The vertical at 405. And so the lesson from some of that other stuff was that the vertical did matter. So a lot of people say, well, look at the horizontal. Well, the horizontal on these is ridiculous. But the vertical is also going to be an issue, so whatever. So this 74U, you got to get rid of the horizontal recoil on it. I don't know. There may not even, at this point, if these are, I don't see how these are the original stats. This may have been part of the nerf on it, but it's absolutely terrible. From like, actually, it's a little bit spiffier, like mobility wise, but boy, that horizontal recoil was just absolutely horrible. So I'll go in and try and get rid of the horizontal recoil. It's still twice, even with the maximum grip. It is twice the AK. And there's like, I don't think there's anything else in here to get rid of that. There's literally nothing to do except make the horizontal recoil worse. So I think they've just trashed the 74U now. Like, you know, again, I go back to what actually matters on these things. ADS time. AK-47 and the 74U, the exact same ADS time. The movement speed. .74U 290, AK-47 275. There's really not much of any difference whatsoever. The sprint speed. 74U 397, AK-47 389. Still, it's so fractional, there's next to no difference whatsoever. Shooting movement doesn't matter. Sprint to fire is 50 milliseconds. I mean, that's like a 20th of a second. The only thing that is actually going to matter on this is the aiming movement speed. So what is the aiming movement speed? AK-47 108, 109, AK-74U 230. It's less than half on the AK. But you're looking at go to the vertical. Vertical recoil on the AK. AK-74U 360, AK-390. That would be, from what I was seeing, a big deal until you see the horizontal. Because the horizontal is just, I don't know what the hell they thought they were doing. Horizontal on the AK-84, AK-74U 310, excuse 210. It is nearly, it's going up to triple the horizontal recoil on a baseline 74U, with the only difference being the aim walking movement speed. And that is exactly what happened with those loadouts. I was just needling people with AK, that as long as you kit that AK to maximize that aim walking movement speed, which is what I did, I don't think there's any point. I don't think there's any point to this gun anymore. So, because even if you put the only attachment that can do the horizontal maximum recoil, it's still twice. It's like literally twice the AK, and you're going to have lower damage, lower fire rate, lower velocity, worse fall off ranges. It's just that the only thing is the ADS movement speed. And if I were to compare them side by side, I don't think there's any question that you'd be doing better with a Groza by far. If you're going to do an SMG, the LC10 and the MAC-10 are the dominators, and now the PPSH is right there with them because they buffed the PPSH. But there's no question that there's zero question, absolutely zero question. The two best SMGs across any mode in the game whatsoever are the MAC-10 and the LC-10. And the only thing, the LC-10 already has great bullet velocity, which made it basically shove the AK74u to the side. The only issue with the MAC-10 is the bullet velocity. As long as you double your bullet velocity on it, you're on par with anything, and it's incredible. It's just a beast. If you're going to use it at any range. If you're just going to use it as a shotgun, you don't even need to do that. Your assault rifles, your QBZ is super mobile. The Groza is right there with it, but the Groza has one of the highest damages in the game and excellent hip fire. I just don't know how well the QBZ will perform out in any competitive thing because it's so weak. It needs a damage buff. But then you can put even an AK right on par with the SMGs for the most part, just by boosting the ADS movement speed. And beyond that, if you use the LMGs, even though they're heavy, they have been given such incredible hip fire, and they are so dominant power-wise and everything else, that if you can get your ADS time down, it depends on if you're going to use ADS. Because the hip fire is so good on them, that's why you see people running the Stoner and the RPD and stuff, because with the hip fire you don't have to go ADS. The holdout on them is really coming the aim walking movement speed and the ADS speed are what's holding them back. It's not really the sprint to fire, it's not really the sprint speed, it's not the movement speed. The things that are holding them back are the aim walking movement speed and the ADS time. If you mitigate those or counteract them with hip fire with lasers, you're set. Of course, you can't use those in competitive stuff, but okay, going into place. So basically, in a nutshell, what does that rule out? AK-47, one of the top guns in the game, across every level. It's a little bit bouncy. You can mitigate it. You can kit it as an SMG and do just fine. XM4, pretty much middle of the road on everything. It's okay. Groza, incredible. QBZ, way too weak. Fara, I mean, I'm sorry for people who like this stuff. It's slow, it's immobile, the pivot speed's horrible. It's not that damaging. It doesn't have any long-range sights. Garbage. FFAR, that may be okay in Warzone, whatever. The recoil's horrible. The damage isn't really even that high. It's not that mobile. It's awful. The QBZ would be good if it had a damage buff. As long as you could deal with lower damage just being mobile and ninja-like, it's okay. It needs a damage buff. The Krig, super accurate. The Krig is like the GKS submachine gun from Black Ops 4. If you're on point, tactical, and accurate, you can deal with the lower damage on it. But I have taken this thing into 6v6 and just gotten blown out of the water by the other guns because it's so low on the damage level. So again, they GA'd the AK-47 out of that, and so for the most part, I've just gone with XM4 in league play. Realistically speaking, your viable guns are the I just don't know if the Krig can hang. I really don't. I've gotten blown up so many times because of the low damage on it. That may be true with this. I haven't used it enough. But if you're actually looking for something viable as an assault rifle on a high level, it would be number 1, the AK, unless it's GA'd, 2, the XM4, and 3, the Groza. Everything else on here is pretty much going to... You might be able to get away with Krig and the QBZ. That's a big might. But they're definitely after those. The top's going to be the AK, the XM4, the Groza, garbage. If you're looking for a submachine gun, I don't care what these people say about the MP5, it's complete junk. The Milano is so weak, it might as well be a joke. The KSP, you're going to burn your finger out. LC10, MAC10, two of the best guns in the game. If you can use these two, you got to boost the velocity if you're going to use it on range on the MAC10. But even if you didn't, if you wanted to use it like a shotgun, you're set. I don't know that these are any really different in Warzone. LC10, MAC10, no question. The 74U's just been completely thrown to the side. They buffed the PPSH to the level that it's as good as the 74U used to be. So, Milano's garbage, MP5's garbage, KSP's just a big finger workout. The TTK on it, I don't know if the TTK is the same now. It was so good before that if you could handle that, it was phenomenal. But the velocity was so low that as soon as you got to any decent range, it started to fall apart. You had to boost the velocity. I don't know. It's specialty. It's niche. But forget the Milano. Forget the MP5. Possibly forget the 74U now that it's so wobbly and stupid. That horizontal recoil is absurd. Bullfrog so-so, but there's no question. If you want the best guns in the game, the absolute best guns in the game, 1, AK, 2, XM4, 3, Groza. Submachine guns, depending on how you're using it. Tied for first and second, MAC-10 and LC-10. After that, you could get away with a KSP, a 74U, a PPSH, or a Bullfrog. I don't know that any of them are any better. But there's no question the MAC-10 and LC-10 are better than any of them. And if you're playing anything where you can use these all have exceptional performance. The M60, they've botched their recoil stats. It has virtually none of the recoil that's listed. When you actually go to use it at range, if you want to use it at sniping rifle range, this thing is epic. If you want to use them at non-sniping rifle range, both of these are incredible. And with the hip fire on them, you can get away with murder. Like, just literally. Oh my goodness, why is this so hitchy? Whoever is on here, if you're on audio, why is this so hitchy? It says it's like over 100 ping. Surely that's not just me.
Dropped him. That's right. Semtex Pro. Better them than me. Boom next. I got time. Bang! One shot.
That should be.
Huh. Hey, Bullet Train, if you're on microphone,
Lab boys will appreciate it.
I just have like one simple question: is your game as broken and hitchy as that just was watching it? All right, whatever. Let's see. Maybe it's turned off. Nope, it's right there. Oh my gosh, things all gonna play by themselves in. That's a quality experience.
All ops. Strike team deploying in the OZ. Ready for tasking.
Field ops, this is Strauss.
Marking
ECM
target
satellite
location.
awaiting launch.
Understood, Doctor. Strike team is en route to the deployment zone.
Now I'm getting warmed up. Right, tag it back. This'll do for now. Acknowledge waypoint towards. Marking target location. Stand clear of the monkey. Loot chest marked. Goodbye, Schwein. This will do for the time being.
Find the ones who did this. I want them all dead.
Acknowledge waypoint gewards. On your feet. Indicating waypoint. Stepped right in front of me. Grenade out! Frag out!
Horde threat eliminated. Nice work, strike team.
I won't go down again.
Acknowledge waypoint gewards. Critical wound, no doubt. It blew its head off.
These modules collect raw Ethereum essence from the infected. After you have terminated them, of course.
Satellite locked in position. ECM's prepped for launch. Firing in 3, 2, 1.
Wonderful. The ECMs have fired. Watch the sky for their descent.
need to take that objective.
Landing gear deployed. Once the module establishes the plasma field, you may commence extraction.
Plasma field perimeter established.
Fill the module's tank to proceed to conversion.
Make sure the module stays at 118.
Essence capacity at 45%. Essence capacity at 50%. Essence capacity at 75%. Essence capacity at maximum. Beginning conversion process.
Conversion's complete.
Unfortunately for you, the study of raw essence is currently restricted to the outbreak zones. I am working on that problem.
Indicating
Anomaly
waypoint.
site located. Activate the beacon to proceed.
Machine ready.
This is Dr. Strauss. One of my Ethereum harvester teams is not responding to my radios.
Acknowledge waypoint towards.
My team's already en route, Dr. Strauss.
Down. Coup de grace. Armor over there. Not bad.
Looks like the undead got here before us. Strauss, my team will finish the job.
I only hope your team proves less fragile than my own.
Ethereum crystal located.
Can anybody on here help out with this crystal map?
What are you at right now?
Somebody help out with the crystal over here, like go to a different floor so we can get all the crystals.
Alright.
Marking Ethereum crystal. Indicating waypoint. I'm hit.
We got most of it. Did we do all of it?
I don't think so. If you get the last one, it drops a thing called an ether tool that does something.
Harvesters are nearby. You'll need to detach the Aetherium canisters before loading them into the rocket.
Do try to hurry. Ethereum degradation is the very moment of harvested detachment. Purge the unit in order to release the canister.
Canister detached. Operator on the move.
You are now experiencing restricted movement and impaired vision, yes? Ethereum crystals are not only heavy, their radiation is potent. It is completely safe.
Marking target location. Loot chest marked. Skull shot.
Strike team has secured all Ethereum canisters.
Control, initiate launch sequence.
Sequence initiated. Internal guidance is green. Launching in
Acknowledge
3,
waypoint reports.
2, 1. Satellite confirms the rocket is en route to delivery site.
Well done. I never doubted the fact that I was in the most capable of hands.
Beacon location has been identified.
Stand by for coordinates.
This can't go unanswered, team. Get us some retribution. Solid kill, strike team. That's one less horde threat to worry about.
Indicating waypoint.
Bye-bye.
Stand by for coordinates. Marking target location. Stand by for coordinates. Fuck you. Toten. Goodbye, you overgrown pain in the ass. Requisitioning this weapon.
I
I'll put this to
show
work.
what I can do with this.
Weapon claimed.
Okay, I'll use it.
Claiming this.
Ready to fight.
Marking target location.
Strike team, we've lost comms with a scientific research unit at a mobile data station in your region.
Acknowledge waypoint towards.
My team will handle this, Gray. We'll report in when we reach the site.
Right, huh? Let's hit the target. Indicating waypoint. Acknowledge waypoint towards. Corpse eliminated.
KIA. Strike team will resume the specimen analysis.
Take the specimen to the analyzer. Once placed, genetic data will begin transmitting via satellite.
Stand by for coordinates.
Go, boom.
Acknowledge waypoint gewards. That has to do something. Death machine deployed. You'll be okay. Undead threat cleared.
Stuck.
Indicating waypoint.
Oh dear. The specimen's retained vocalization abilities. It's sending out some kind of signal.
It's ringing the damn dinner bell. Strike team, hostiles moving in. Protect the station until data upload is complete.
Appears KIA.
What I mean to say is, there's more coming.
Smoke checked.
valuable intel.
Hostile corps eliminated. Undead threat clear.
Specimen analysis complete. Got everything you need, Doctor?
All genetic data collected. Our lab boys will appreciate it.
Acknowledge waypoint coordinates.
Beacon site identified. Proceed when ready.
Indicating waypoint.
Find whoever or whatever did this and eradicate them. Solid kill, strike team. That's one less horde threat to worry about.
Stand by for coordinates. Target eliminated. Requesting immediate exfil. Over. Crafting table tagged.
Chopper en route for extraction. Good work out there.
Raptor 1 at the LC. Omega Group has ID'd our position. We gotta move.
Special threat is total.
Area's too hot to proceed with evac. Mop them up, strike team. Raptor 1 has secured strike team. Moving out.
All objectives completed, strike team. Good work in the OZ.